Hey everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. My guest today is broadcasting all the way from Australia, where it's already tomorrow, so Easter is over. I'm excited to meet him because he's going to be talking about how you can lose fat and build muscle on a vegan diet. His name is Forrest Nash. Please welcome him to the show. It's so nice to meet you.
Well, hey, it's great to meet you as well, Chef AJ, and thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here, and yeah, happy Easter.
Yeah. So it's already Monday. It's like Monday morning for you, right?
It is Monday, 9 a.m. here, Melbourne time.
Oh, good. So you didn't have to get up too early, but you don't sound Australian.
No, so I'm American. I grew up in Virginia, actually, and yeah, I just moved here about not quite 5 years ago, so 2017. And yeah, been here ever since. But yeah, my accent still gives me away.
Do you like it there?
Yeah, I do. I love it here. It's not that different from the States. It's people drive on the other side of the road and speak a little bit differently, but it's not too much culture shock or anything like that. And I have to say, in Melbourne in particular, which is where I live, the vegan scene is fantastic. So there's like a really kind of vibrant community and tons of vegan restaurants and all that sort of thing. So yeah, it's a really nice place to live.
That's fantastic. Mandy, who is in Australia, says he sounds a bit Aussie.
Oh, that's good. Maybe I picked it up a little bit over the last few years.
That is something. Well, yeah, it's that is just, I just think it's so interesting when people move to other countries. Were you vegan before you moved to Australia?
I was, yeah. So I've been vegan since 2015 and yeah, moved in 2017.
So why did you become vegan?
Well, that's a great question. So I can probably get into my kind of background a little bit, which might be different from most folks. I was actually raised as a vegetarian all the way from birth, so never eaten meat, which is pretty cool, I think. So thanks, Mom and Dad, for that one.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. And so I had that kind of background as an ethical vegetarian. And then as I got older, I got really into health and fitness, which is one of my huge passions in life. And I was just kind of, reading up a little bit and doing some research about nutrition and those sorts of things. And I also just noticed that the the animal products I had in my diet didn't really agree with me very well. It was just dairy was all that we had because we were basically like lacto vegetarian in my family. But I just found with dairy products, sometimes I would get congested or, like break out acne or things of that nature. Sometimes I'd feel bloated, like drinking whey protein shakes and those sorts of things. And so I just started looking into basically plant-based nutrition. And I'm also the type of person where if I'm going to do something, I like to do it 100%. And so I was like, I'm already most of the way there. I might as well go all the way. And I actually got inspired because I could see some other folks out there online. And of course, there's tons of them nowadays, but this was like back in 2014, 2015. But I could see that there were some people who were doing, vegan bodybuilding and fitness and those sorts of things that I was really interested in. And they were doing it on a plant-based diet and they were thriving and doing really well. And so I have to give a shout out there to Derek Treesize, who I think you've had as a guest on the show before. He was one of my big inspirations to make the switch there because, of course, he's a vegan bodybuilder and athlete and just all around great guy. And so I was looking at his website and reading some of the information on there, and I figured I'd give it a shot. And I made that switch back in early 2015, and it was the best decision I've ever made in my life. And certainly just been there's no looking back. I'll put it that way.
I'm so happy. So what made your parents decide to raise you vegetarian? And do you have siblings also?
Yeah, so I have one brother who's vegetarian as well. With my parents, it was part of the spiritual path that they follow. So basically for ethical reasons, if you can basically live a healthy life and have a healthy diet without harming animals, then it seems like a pretty good idea to do that. And so that's what they were doing already. And I just kind of took it a step further with the fully plant-based diet. And I'm pleased to say I've now converted my parents. So they are probably 99.9% vegan at this point, which is really cool. And they are loving it as well.
That's fantastic. Now I can see just the top of your t-shirt. Like I think it says plant something, but I can't see what
Plant
it says.
strong.
Nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
So what about your brother? Did he join the group?
I believe he is still vegetarian. He's kind of the stubborn one of the family, but we try to set a good example. I'll put it that way. So maybe one day he'll join the fold.
Older brother or younger brother?
He's older. Yeah.
That's why he's not listening. Yeah. Is he also a bodybuilder?
He is not. No, the thing is, when we were growing up, I was always like, he's a big guy. He's like 6'4" and 200 plus pounds. And I was always like the skinny kid growing up. And plus he was older than me, so he was bigger anyway. And so I was like, man, I got to do something about this. And so I started working out when I was like 15, but of course he kind of had the head start already in that regard. So he probably didn't feel like he needed to.
Well, they're great. I'm so happy that your parents, well, first of all, raised you meatless. That must be really cool. Like you never had a desire to have a cheeseburger or anything like that.
Nope, not at all. And now that I'm, pretty well informed about nutrition, of course, the ethical, environmental side of things as well, I feel really grateful to them for giving me that kind of upbringing and start to life. And yeah, certainly no desire to try out going the other way.
Yeah, I mean, because some kids might have rebelled, but the thing is you don't crave what you've never had.
Yep. Yeah, I guess there was maybe a short time when I was kind of getting into the fitness side of things a little bit more, where I considered, oh, maybe I should have some egg whites or something like that, because that's like a protein source that a lot of people use for bodybuilding. But I never ended up doing that, and yeah, ended up going the other direction, and I'm glad I did.
That's great. What brought you to Australia? What do you do in Australia?
Yeah, that was a great question. I guess there's kind of two parts to that there. So the reason I live in Australia is I fell in love with an Australian. So we met about 5 years ago now. So back in 2017 on the holistic holiday at sea vegan cruise, believe it or not.
Are you kidding? I was that year. Why didn't you fall in love with me? No, I'm just kidding. I'm already married. That's fantastic. So many people got married from that love boat.
I know. Yeah, I think Robert Cheek and his wife met there as well, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, it's crazy. So we just happened to meet by chance on that particular cruise. There was like a single social or something the second night, and everyone was like, "Oh, you should go." I was like, "I don't want to go," but I went, and yeah, we met and we hit it off. And yeah, one thing led to another. I came to visit Australia. She came to visit the States a few times, but then yeah, later that year, I was kind of in a situation where I was going to be moving anyway. And yeah, just decided to give it a shot, and the rest is history.
Well, that's fantastic. That's such a great story. I loved. But what do you train people in person or online? So what is your profession?
Yep. Yeah. So that basically is my profession. I used to do a little bit of both. So I would do in-person, training sessions like the gyms, personal training, and that sort of thing. And then also online coaching in virtual format over Zoom, kind of like what we're doing right now. And then about 2 years ago, back when COVID first started, and of course lockdowns hit and all the gyms closed, yeah, I decided to basically just pivot my business. So I shifted over to fully online coaching. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 2 years. And I find it actually works really well. And so I can connect with people, here locally in Melbourne and in Australia, but also all over the English speaking world. So I have clients in like US, Canada, New Zealand. I've had folks in the UK before. And so it works really well because people can still go and train on their own times and, do things that are convenient for them, go to their own gym and do what they're comfortable with, but still have that structure and guidance, have a program to follow, have somebody who is familiar with plant-based nutrition. Of course, that's kind of my niche that I specialize in with my clients. And also with the online format, I find it works really well because you have a bit more time to chat during the sessions. You can talk about lifestyle factors like sleep and stress management and different things like that, as well as just training and nutrition. And I try to do that to take a really holistic approach that really takes everything into account.
That's great. Brooke, who's watching live, says, "I'm vegetarian and trying to convert to full vegan. What advice would you have?" Because that was your case. Was it difficult to convert?
I didn't find it particularly difficult. Again, my situation was just dairy products were the only ones that I had in my diet to begin with. So, Brooke is maybe she might have eggs and dairy, or pescatarian. Obviously, there's a spectrum there. I would say, sometimes a gradual transition can work better than just going cold turkey. Depends on the individual. Some people get really inspired and they're like, "That's it. I'm never eating animal products again." And if so, that can be great. But you don't have to do it that way. And if you want it to be sustainable, I think it's important to take your time and just figure out some new dietary substitutes for the animal products that you're accustomed to eating, and then gradually kind of incorporate those into your diet over time. So it definitely doesn't have to be an overnight thing. You can do that if you want to, but I'd say for most folks, it might be more sustainable to do kind of the gradual transition there.
Right. Do you work with people on their diet too?
Yes. Yeah. So that's a huge part of what I do with my coaching and my online business. And that, again, that's one of the things I prefer about online coaching, because when I used to do personal training sessions in the gym, of course, you can go there and you get a great workout with somebody, but that usually takes the majority of the time because you just have an hour for the session and the workout might be an hour. And then you kind of talk about nutrition a little bit, like in between sets or something like that, but you can't really get in depth with it. And so with the online coaching, we don't actually do the workouts usually during the sessions. I give them a program and a plan to follow, and then they can go and do it when it's convenient for them. But that frees us up during the sessions to really deep dive on nutrition and really kind of take care of everything there. So to make sure that the training and nutrition are working together, because of course, that's where people are going to see the best results.
That's great. In your bio, it says you're a men's physique champion. What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, so I've done a few physique competitions. Men's physique is basically, it's just a specific class within the sport of bodybuilding. And so that was the class that I've competed in. And yeah, I've done a couple of competitions. The first one was back in 2017, which was actually with the Plant Built team. I believe you've had some of those folks on, like Danny and Giacomo, and of course, Derek Treesize is a member of the team as well. And so that was a really fantastic opportunity. I got to basically take the stage with them. And yeah, I was lucky enough to kind of win first place in my particular category at that competition, which was really neat. And that was also because we had our team there was like, I think 40 plus vegan athletes at the one event. And we came away with like, I think 30 some medals and trophies and you know, first place finishes there. And I got to contribute one of those. So that was pretty cool because we made a big splash in the media because it wasn't like a vegan competition, right? We were going up against meat eaters. And so that's something that I find really rewarding, is to kind of break some of those stereotypes and show that you can actually be really strong and fit and healthy and have a great physique and achieve anything that you want to from an athletic standpoint while on a plant-based diet. So a little bit of a tangent there, but that was the first comp that I did. I did another one in 2018, which was actually here in Melbourne after I moved. And yeah, I was lucky enough to come away with the first place there as well.
Well, that's amazing. Congratulations. When you beat a meat eater, do you kind of go, eh?
I try to be a good sport about it, but yeah, there's definitely, you know, I like to kind of represent there on stage and do my part.
But do you ever like say, well, I won because I'm vegan?
I think being vegan definitely helps as far as bodybuilding is concerned, because a big part of the sport of bodybuilding is actually dieting, because you have to get very, very lean. You have to lose a ton of body fat, almost all of it really, in order to be competitive in that sport. And so, of course, that means, you know, eating at a calorie deficit, you're restricting your food and all those sorts of things. But the folks who are eating a non-plant-based diet tend to have a harder time with it because they're eating usually lower carbs, more protein and fat, and the diet tends to be less satiating, versus if you're someone like myself who's eating a predominantly whole food plant-based diet, the volume of the food is higher, and I also have a higher carbohydrate intake than most of the other competitors. And so I just feel better. I've got more energy for my workouts. I can recover better during my whole contest prep, and I get to the stage and I don't feel like a zombie. I still feel pretty good. And so then that helps, because you need to be on stage and look happy and charismatic and like you're having a good time, not like you're just about to keel over because you haven't had a carbohydrate in months. And so, yeah, I find in that respect, it definitely does give me an edge.
So do you have to eat differently when you're training for a competition?
Yeah, so it's basically in sort of physique sport or bodybuilding training, there's a few different kind of phases that one might go through. So there's sort of the off-season training and dieting phase, which is usually the majority of the time. And then you've got sort of your contest prep period, which could be, you know, anywhere from maybe like 12 weeks up to like 6 months. Some people do even longer than that, where you're basically dieting down to get stage lean, as it's called, for that competition, or you get super shredded and, you know, very little body fat, and you can see all your muscle definition and all that stuff. And so that basically it involves eating less, but, you know, still doing it in a way that's going to be sustainable for that time that you need to be dieting, and still making sure you're getting enough protein in, getting the carbohydrates in to fuel your workouts and recovery, and maintain muscle mass while you're losing fat. Because that's the key. If you were to just eat very little and like do a lot of cardio and those sorts of things, yeah, you can lose weight just fine, but unfortunately you probably lose muscle along with it. And so it's really important that you have your training on point, you're training really hard during that time, and also that you're eating appropriately so that you can maintain as much muscle as possible while losing all of that body fat that you need to lose.
Wow. Give an example of the kind of foods you're eating when you're, as a bodybuilder and somebody that's not overweight, trying to lose weight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you know, I eat a predominantly whole food plant-based diet, and so it's, you know, pretty simple, probably similar to what you or, you know, maybe a lot of your viewers might eat. But for breakfast, I'll typically have something like oatmeal, so I'll just have, you know, rolled oats, some unsweetened oil-free soy milk with that, so that adds a little bit of extra protein. That's what I had for breakfast today, actually. And then I'll usually put berries on top, just because that's, of course, super nutrient dense, and it also increases the kind of volume of the meal, makes it more satiating. So that'll be my go-to breakfast just about every single day. Then for lunch, I might just have something like rice and beans. And of course, I'll throw a lot of veggies on top of that. Again, kind of bulk up the meal, make it very filling and satiating. After the workout, I might have like a smoothie or a protein shake. So I might have, you know, just some protein and maybe some fruit or something like that at that time. When I'm dieting down for competition, I'll eat more of sort of the low calorie density fruits. So things like apples and oranges and pears and peaches and those sorts of things, because again, they're very filling. I get to eat a lot of them for not a ton of calories. And so it helps keep hunger at bay, which is really important when you're dieting for a show. And then, you know, for other meals a day, I typically probably have like 4 main meals and then that sort of post-workout snack as well. So for other meals, I might have something like tofu, maybe have like some sort of an oil-free stir fry with that, or maybe have, baked potatoes, sweet potatoes, have some tofu, steamed veggies, things of that nature. So pretty simple stuff, but yeah, I find it works really well. And I'm the type of person where I don't mind eating, the same or very similar meals day to day. And so standardizing the diet I find really helpful, because then you don't have to worry about what you're eating on any given day. You kind of have it all planned out and you know what to do in advance.
I like eating the same thing every day. I mean, if I like what I'm eating, you know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah. Eventually, you might get tired of things, you swap things out, but yeah, I find it, it definitely makes things a lot easier to just do that. And then you can do kind of the batch cooking or bulk meal prep. You prepare food for several days at a time, and that saves a lot of time in the kitchen as well.
Absolutely. When you're not training for a competition, is the leeway that you have maybe a little vegan junk food, I'm guessing? Maybe
on special occasions, go out and enjoy a meal out or things of that nature. But even if I'm kind of in my off season, so to speak, of course, I have more calories to work with. And actually, the calories can be quite high because you're trying to gain weight and build muscle during that off season period. So I might be eating, 4,000 calories a day, which, yeah, you could fit a lot of junk food into that if you want to. But I don't really enjoy doing that too much. I don't feel great if I eat a lot of junk food. Occasionally, I might have some, again, meal out or things of that nature. But I'm not the type of person who's like, oh, yeah, cheat meal twice a week or something like that. It's like, maybe every 2 weeks I have a meal out, that sort of thing. And the rest of it is just the same simple food that I have at home, but just more of it. And I make some swaps. So I'm eating more calorie dense foods rather than those kind of calorie dilute foods that I would eat during the contest prep diet. So for example, when I'm in the off season, after my workout, I would have dates and, my protein shake after a workout, because it's, easy to get in a ton of calories if you're eating dates, versus I was trying to get in that same amount of calories eating like apples or watermelon or something like that. I feel like I'm going to explode. And so it's helpful to kind of be familiar with that sort of energy density spectrum, and you can position yourself wherever along it you need to be.
Yeah. So you basically are using calorie density.
Yes.
Both ways. Yeah. That's very
Exactly.
Cool. Question from a live viewer. I am losing weight as I age, and I'm wondering if it's muscle loss because I'm in my 60s and I don't go to the gym anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if you're losing weight, it's probably, if you're not doing resistance training, it's probably going to be a combination of maybe some muscle loss and some body fat you might also be losing. It's probably not pure muscle, but yeah, I would recommend doing some form of weight bearing exercise is a really good idea, particularly as we get older. That can be really important to help basically prevent sarcopenia, keep muscle mass, intact, keep muscle loss at bay. But also it helps with, bone density and things of that nature. So just really good idea to do in general. And yeah, not something that you have to do a ton of, maybe 2 or 3 times a week, do a little kind of full body workout. And you can even do that at home if you want to. You can maybe get some resistance bands or a few dumbbells and those sorts of things, and still get a pretty good kind of training stimulus that way. But yeah, you don't necessarily have to be going to the gym all the time, but I would definitely recommend doing some resistance training. To follow along with that, though, if you're losing weight, it just means, and let's assume you don't want to be losing weight, it just means you probably need to eat a little bit more. And so that will help, again, kind of preserve muscle mass. If you're not at a caloric deficit, you'll have an easier time maintaining that for sure.
How many hours a day do you train? And I guess it's just different if you have a competition.
Yeah, it varies. It's actually not that different competition versus in off season, except maybe leading up to competition, I do a bit more cardio to help burn calories, again, help with that fat loss process. I don't do as much or much of any cardio in the off season usually. I'll go out for walks and things of that nature, but I'm not like doing structured cardio sessions. But typically my workouts will be maybe an hour to an hour and a half. I train 6 days a week, but again, not a recommendation for everyone else. That's just something that I really enjoy doing. I'm passionate about it. It's not something I have to force myself to do. It's something I would have to force myself not to do. And so, yeah, for me, it's really easy to sustain that because I just really enjoy it.
Were you always an avid fitness buff, even growing up?
I started doing basically fitness training when I was 15, and I'm 30 now. So yeah, I guess I've had a pretty good kind of span there. About half my life I've been really into it, and of course learning as I go. And I feel like I've gained some knowledge and experience over those years. And so yeah, I'm happy to be in a spot now where I feel pretty confident about what I'm doing, and yeah, really enjoy it.
Wow, that's amazing. So it says on your bio, you're an NASM certified personal trainer and fitness nutritional specialist. What does NASM stand for?
Yeah, so NASM is just the National Academy of Sports Medicine. And that's just one of the one of the leading organizations in the US, actually, because I got certified before I moved over here, that issues those accreditations for personal trainers. And so I did my certification with them. I think it was way back in 2014, actually, before I even went vegan, just shortly before. But yeah, so I'm certified with them, and then also did that fitness nutrition specialization through them as well, which was helpful. Just have a deeper understanding of nutrition, but of course not specific to plant-based nutrition. And so then you can probably see in my bio there as well, I went ahead and did the certificate in plant-based nutrition from the T. Colin Campbell Center for Nutrition Studies at Cornell University. And I really enjoyed that course, got a lot out of that as well.
Great. Here's a question I hear a lot. How do I lose belly fat?
So losing fat in any area basically just requires a caloric deficit. You just have to eat less or move more or some combination of the two. Basically, you have to get your energy expenditure at the end of the day to be higher than what your intake is over time, and then maintain that condition long enough for fat loss to occur. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be any compelling research that you can lose fat specifically in a certain part of your body. So like doing a lot of crunches to spot reduce belly fat or something like that, probably not going to work. But yeah, it's just a matter of consistency, sticking with it over time, get yourself into that caloric deficit, and then stick with it, maybe for 8 or 12 weeks or 16 weeks or something like that, long enough to see some notable changes occur. And then you probably will find that you have less belly fat at the end of that time. Unfortunately, the midsection tends to be one of the areas where the body will sort of hang on to fat longer. People tend to lose it more around the extremities first. So you might notice first you see a little bit more definition, or like you see more veins in your hands and feet or your arms and legs. And then gradually that leanness sort of starts to work its way in towards the core. And it makes sense if you think about it from an evolutionary perspective, because if you have more body fat around the midsection, it kind of helps protect your internal organs from trauma or act as insulation and things of that nature. And so the body is more reluctant to part with it, but it absolutely will. You can definitely lose fat in that area. It just sometimes can take a little bit longer to see progress there than it might in terms of losing fat in another part of the body.
Cool. Man, what are you drinking? I'm guessing maybe water?
Just water. Yeah, I've got my nutritionfacts.org mug though. So shout out to Dr. Michael Greger. He's there now.
Nice. Mandy, who actually lives in Australia, wanted to know if you either use or recommend protein powders.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I don't necessarily recommend protein powders per se. I do use them personally, and that's just out of convenience. So, if you are training and eating with the goal of building muscle or maintaining muscle while losing fat, it does help to have a little bit of a higher protein intake coming in. And so protein powder can be helpful in hitting that, just so that you're not eating like tons and tons of beans and tofu and stuff like that throughout the day. I eat tons of those foods anyway, and I really enjoy them. But yeah, the protein powder can be convenient, just like after a workout, for example. It's easier to down a protein shake or a smoothie or something like that than to like sit down and eat a plate of rice and beans in the gym for a lot of people. So I use it for that reason. It's absolutely not required by any stretch, but yeah, it is a convenience item. And so I use it for that reason. And it's not because I'm vegan. So people who are into bodybuilding and fitness and they're not vegan, they drink tons and tons of protein shakes and whey protein and casein and all this stuff. I even had a friend who was drinking like beef protein shakes, which is disgusting. But yeah, it's just, that's kind of the state of the sport in bodybuilding. People use protein powder all the time. I use it pretty sparingly, I think, compared to most folks. But yeah, it is there as a convenience. It works really well for that. And otherwise, I try to get the rest of my nutrients from whole plant foods because, of course, the nutrient density is going to be much better.
Yeah. Who is your typical client?
Yeah, it's a great question. So my typical client is somebody who is either already vegan or vegetarian, or they're interested in kind of transitioning or moving in that direction. I'd say the majority of my clients are already vegan, but some of them are kind of, maybe just kind of moving in that direction, and they're interested in learning more about it. And so they want to work with somebody who's familiar with plant-based nutrition, because unfortunately nowadays, if you go to just, kind of a mainstream gym and hire a personal trainer, a lot of them are still going to be telling you they have to eat chicken and broccoli to build muscle, and, the same sort of outdated fitness information that's been around for a while. And so people tend to seek me out, maybe after having had that experience or just after having done some research online, because they are interested in plant-based nutrition and they also have fitness goals that they want to achieve. And those goals can range from, doing bodybuilding or physique competitions. I've had clients who have done that, to just, getting stronger and building muscle, losing body fat, but just not for competition, just for lifestyle purposes. And folks who just, want to have some form of accountability and, some sort of training and nutrition in their life for the long term. And they find it beneficial to work with somebody to do that, just to provide that structure and accountability and kind of have a program to follow.
Thank you. I just want to thank Sherry Likes Fruit for her super chat donation. We're starting to get lots of questions in the chat. So Dina says, is your girlfriend also into bodybuilding?
She is not, no, but she is vegan. So of course we met on the vegan cruise. So yeah,
Well, I would imagine I would imagine, yeah, if you met on the cruise, that's fantastic. Now, Mandy wants to know, can you work with people who only work out at home who don't have a gym membership?
Yes, absolutely, 100%. So over the last 2 years, I don't know about the majority, but a lot of the folks I've been working with have been working out at home because, of course, gyms have just been closed in a lot of places during that time. And so, yeah, you can absolutely get a great workout in at home. It helps if you have a little bit of equipment, like I mentioned earlier, the dumbbells or resistance bands or things like that. But even if you're just working out with body weight, there's still a lot that you can do. And so, yeah, I have clients now, gyms are reopened in most places. So I have a lot of clients going back to the gym, but I still have plenty of folks who are working out at home and, yeah, can absolutely do that.
Great. If there's again another question, a couple more questions about protein powder. I just saw about a specific kind. It was, I think, a chocolate one. I saw it. Where did it go?
Sounds delicious.
What do you think of Vega chocolate protein powder? It has dehydrated greens and I think pea protein.
Yeah, I think that's fine. Vega is one of the original sort of OG plant-based protein powders out there. It's been around for a really long time. I think they're a pretty reputable brand. If it has some dehydrated greens in there, that might be good for just a little bit extra nutrient density. It's still nowhere near as good as just eating your greens fresh. So, don't kind of delude yourself into thinking that. But if you're going to have a protein shake, you might as well get some greens in there. So yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Great. And here's a question. When you lose for the competitions, is it harder each time to lose the fat and to keep the muscle?
Like doing one competition versus then the subsequent one is harder that you would do in the future? No, not really. Yeah, if anything, it's probably easier because I've done it before and then I know how to do it. And I kind of have a process in place, and yeah, you have more experience, so you kind of know what to expect and that sort of thing. I think some people can get into kind of an unfortunate cycle there if they're doing a lot of contest prep diets back to back, where then unfortunately you get down, your calories are super low and your body kind of adapts to that. Of course, your body doesn't want to starve to death, and so your metabolism will adapt, and then you end up maintaining your weight on very low calories. And then it does get quite difficult to do future fat loss diets and more contest preps in the future. But the sort of antidote to that is to have a good off season where you really work on building your calorie intake back up. And then you can get to a point where before you start your next contest prep, you're eating plenty of calories, you're feeling really good. Or the way I actually feel is often that I'm tired of eating so much and I'm ready to actually eat less. And so then it's kind of refreshing to start the diet. But yeah, it really helps to kind of have that structured and systematic approach. And so that's something where if you're really interested in doing contest prep, I would definitely recommend working with a coach, someone who's experienced in that and who has done it before, because that can make all the difference in the world.
Do you have an aunt named Evelyn by any chance?
I do, yeah. I think she said she was going to tune in.
Yeah, she said she's really proud of you. That's that's so nice. I love when family watches.
Yep. Hi, Aunt Lynn.
I think this might be a typo because I've never heard of anything called ant oil. So maybe it's any oil. But Jackson asks, do you use any oil or added fat in your diet?
Yeah, it's a good question. I definitely don't use ant oil. I've never heard of that. So
I've never heard of it either.
Yeah, that sounds gross and probably not part of a plant-based diet anyway. So, but no, as far as oil is concerned, I'd say probably 99% oil-free. I might have it as a condiment where I have a couple drops of toasted sesame oil on top of a stir fry or something like that, but I'm not cooking with oil or cooking anything in oil. I really try to steer clear of fried foods. Of course, in part because it's not a great way to spend your calories, but also I don't feel very good after I eat those foods. I just feel kind of bleh. And so, yeah, I prefer to keep very low oil, close to oil free as much as possible. As far as fat is concerned, though, it's absolutely important to have some healthy fats in your diet, even when you are dieting down for a competition. You don't want to let your fat intake get too low, because then you can actually run into some issues as far as like hormone levels and different things there, and that can have a negative impact on your training and recovery. So fat is definitely very important. I do eat less fat when I'm dieting for a competition, but still getting it in from good, healthy, whole food sources like, your avocados or, nuts and seeds and things of that nature is good. And I do also take a vegan omega-3 supplement, which is from algae oil. And I usually have that, on a regular daily basis as well.
Nice. You don't have to do this, but Susie Q says, show us the winning abs. You don't have to.
I'll tell you what, the best I could probably do sitting down in a chair is I'll show you the gun show there. So that's something for you, Susie.
Thank you. Okay. Here's a question. Do you work with many women over 60 who want to build muscle to maintain or improve bone density?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's not the majority of my client base, but I definitely have worked with folks in that demographic. And again, like we were talking about earlier, I think as we get older, it is super important, maybe even more important at that age, to do some resistance training and to pay attention to your diet, just for the reason that you said, to make sure that you are maintaining your muscle mass, maintaining bone density, into later life. And that will actually be tremendously beneficial in terms of just keeping your mobility up and enabling you to continue to do the physical activities that you enjoy for many, many years into the future. So yeah, absolutely have done that. And I think it's great that you're thinking about that. And I would highly recommend doing some form of, weight bearing exercise like that.
Yep. Mary wants to know, have you coached people with eating disorders who want to be healthy and fit?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I have probably worked with some folks who maybe have had eating disorders in the past. I don't work with people who are like actively in the process of recovering from an eating disorder though, because that's outside of my scope of practice. So that's somebody who would maybe need to work with like a dietitian or somebody who really specializes in eating disorders. But yeah, it's, if you've had an eating disorder in the past and then now you feel like you're in a kind of stable and comfortable place with your diet, but you want to learn more about how to eat according to the goals that you have, I could potentially help with that. But yeah, very careful around eating disorders because it's not something that you want to be sort of providing guidance on if you're not qualified in that. And it's not my area of expertise.
Right. But I, what I've known, because this happens to me, is that a lot of times people that eating disorders don't disclose it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so I have had that as well. And so what I have now is I have a really detailed intake questionnaire that people have to fill out before I start working with them. And one of the questions on there is, do you have a history of any eating disorders? So that way you kind of, take care of that early on.
Cool. Okay. Just dislocated my elbow 5 weeks ago. When to get back to the gym? I think ask your doctor that maybe.
Yeah, that would probably be one where you want to go see a doctor and then maybe get a referral to like a physio or physical therapist and, see if some rehab needs to be done there. Get their advice in terms of when to resume exercise. And probably the way to do it is to be starting with some very gentle, light, rehabilitative type exercises that you could get prescribed from one of those practitioners. And then once you're able to kind of move through a normal range of motion pain-free, and importantly, when you get the green light from that, specialist to actually get back into resistance training, then you can go ahead and do that. But if it's just one elbow, then you can still get in there and probably train 75% of your body because you've still got your lower body, your core, and your other arm and everything that you can do there. So I wouldn't use that, or I wouldn't let that derail you from going to the gym altogether. Still absolutely get in there and do everything that you can, which is a lot. And then just do your due diligence, do that rehab and get that injury healed up as fast as possible. What you don't want to do is blow off the rehab and be like, oh, I'll be fine. And then just after it kind of stops hurting quite as much, go back to the gym. And then you risk kind of re-aggravating it and making it worse and taking longer to recover.
Well, I love that you said that there's other body parts, because I remember I had a client once and she wouldn't exercise. She had trigger thumb. Now I get trigger thumb is painful. I have it, but there's 200 other muscles. I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's like you can't maybe lift weights, but it was like, well, I can't, you could take a walk,
Yes.
You could get on a bike, things like that.
Yeah, you can almost always do something unless you're lying in a hospital bed. You can probably do some form of exercise. And so, yeah, good idea to focus on the positive and do what you can.
Cool. Mary says, I've cut back on the weightlifting, experimenting with that because I can't really figure out what was happening and where the pounds came from. I know how important weight besting exercise is for
weight bearing, maybe.
Oh yeah. I just read what they write, if there's if it's ant oil, I read ant oil,
Maybe that's a new thing.
Yeah, for our bones though. So I'm doing a bit more Pilates this month, 3 to 4 classes a week instead of 2. And I'm starting to run again and still doing Peloton spin classes. What do you think of this plan? Does it sound like enough strength work? I'm still planning to get a weighted vest at some point.
Mm-hmm. I think the weighted vest can be really cool because you can wear that like if you go for a walk or just doing daily activities, and that does add a little bit more of a weight bearing component and also a calorie burning component to your activities. And so if you're interested in losing weight, that is actually a strategy that sometimes people use very effectively. It sounded like at the beginning of the question there, the person was saying they weren't sure where the weight had come from. So like maybe they had gained some weight and they maybe didn't want to, and maybe they were thinking that was because they had been doing resistance training. And so if you're doing resistance training, training and you gain weight, it's more likely that some of that weight that you gain will be muscle mass, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But as far as the weight gain itself is concerned, if you did gain weight, it was just because you were eating at a caloric surplus over time. And so you would need to just eat a little bit less or do a little bit more activity in order to not gain weight, assuming that you didn't want to. That's me trying to sort of interpret what the person was asking. So sorry if I got it wrong there.
Well, I mean, how do you tell when, when the scale goes up, how do you tell what it is? Water, protein, water, fat.
Yeah, that's a great question. So body water definitely plays a role, and that can account for a lot of the variation day to day that people will see. Like some folks like to track their weight on a daily basis. I'm one of those people because I like to have a lot of data. But yeah, it's very normal for it to kind of bounce around. And if you don't know to expect that, it can kind of do your head in because you're like, oh man, I gained weight one day and I lost weight the next. And what the heck is going on? But a lot of those day-to-day fluctuations are just purely due to changes in body water hydration status, and also what you had to eat and drink the day before, of course, can make a difference, particularly if folks go out, maybe they have a meal out that's higher in sodium content than what they would normally eat. That can cause a lot of water retention because your body basically trying to dilute the extra sodium until it can get rid of it. And so that causes the weight to go up, and that can really mess with people's heads. And so it's just helpful to know that. And in terms of kind of interpreting what's going on, I find one of the most effective strategies that I use there and use with clients as well is if you are tracking your weight and you're interested in doing that, do several weigh-ins over the course of a week and do that every week. And then what you can do is take the average weight at the end of each week, and that will sort of iron out a lot of those day-to-day variations. And then when you compare over time, 1 week's average to the next, and so on, you can get a really good idea of what the trend is. And so if consistently your weekly averages are trending down, then you probably are losing weight and it's not just body water fluctuations. If they're trending up after weeks and weeks, then it's probably, you're in a surplus, you're gaining weight. And if it's staying the same, then you're probably maintaining your weight. But doing those multiple weigh-ins so you have more data and then looking at the weekly average, I find can be really helppful. It's not for everyone because some people just don't like to weigh themselves or they don't want to be looking at the scale that often. And that can kind of mess with your psychology. And so if you're one of those people, you can use other strategies like, circumference measurements or how your clothes fit or, just kind of how you're looking and feeling, stuff like that, which will be a little bit less precise. So there's definitely a trade-off there. But yeah, if people don't mind weighing themselves, I think doing that and doing the weekly average is the way to go.
Great, thanks. I just saw a question on protein. Here it is from Mark. How many grams of protein does an average person need?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it kind of depends what your goals are. If you are just looking to be, healthy, avoid protein deficiency, which almost nobody has nowadays, and kind of live a long, healthy life, minimize risk for chronic disease, the protein requirement is not super high. I think it's like 0.4 grams per kilogram or something like that, which for most, or 0.6 grams, something like that. It comes at 0.8. I think 0.8. I got that mixed up there because I'm thinking kilos and pounds, but yeah, it's 0.8 grams per kilogram, which is, for the average person, maybe like 50, 60 grams of protein per day. And if you're eating sufficient calories on a whole food plant-based diet, it's almost impossible not to get that. So you don't have to worry about that at all if you're just looking to be healthy and not, have an issue with not eating enough protein. However, if you do have kind of physique and body composition goals that you're interested in, gaining muscle or losing body fat while maintaining muscle, it is helpful to have a bit more protein coming in. There's kind of a range there. So on the high end of that range, it can be all the way up to like 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight per day. And that's way more, right? That's like more than twice as much as the amount you need just to stay healthy. But that's kind of the gold standard in the research literature on protein intake for body composition, where if you're eating that much, more protein almost certainly will not help. Probably a little bit less would still be fine, but that's like you definitely get a check mark there as far as protein. There's a bit of a range though. So anywhere from like 1 gram per pound on the very high end down to like 0.7 grams per pound on the lower end. Somewhere in there is probably going to be fine as far as protein intake if you're interested in building muscle and maintaining it while you lose body fat. That being said though, there is definitely a trade-off there with higher protein intakes. And so it's something you have to take into account. Probably eating a little bit less protein is going to be better for longevity. Eating more protein is going to be better as far as building muscle. And so somewhere in the middle, probably a happy medium can be found, but it's up to you to decide where on that spectrum you want to be.
All right. Well, Dr. McDougall has said nobody's ever protein deficient unless they're calorie deficient.
Yep. Yeah, it's quite hard to do. But on the other hand, if you are dieting down like for bodybuilding competition, you are kind of calorie deficient on purpose. And so in that situation, it is important to make sure you have plenty of protein coming in.
Understood. Okay. Mary says, how do you convince your clients and others that plant-based protein is sufficient and that no animal protein is needed? And I bet that with the people you're in competition with, even when you beat them, they still don't believe it, I'm guessing.
Yeah, so I think obviously a lot of those myths and misconceptions still exist about how, yeah, you have to eat meat to build muscle and all that sort of nonsense. Times are definitely changing, which is really cool to see. And of course, I've had different like documentaries like The Game Changers coming out a few years ago, which kind of opened up people's minds about that a lot, which is pretty cool to see. But yeah, with the clients that I work with, most of them are already kind of interested in, moving their diet in that direction if they're not there already. And so I don't usually have to convince them too much. If somebody really doesn't think that like plant-based protein is going to be adequate to build muscle, they're probably not going to hire me because, that's sort of my area of expertise. But yeah, for just people that you talk to at the gym or people that you see at a bodybuilding competition or that sort of thing, yeah, it can definitely be helpful to just, have a conversation with somebody like that. And that's why I always try to wear, vegan t-shirts when I'm going to the gym and stuff like that, sort of my passive activism there, because I think that can be a really effective way to get people's attention. Like, wow, this guy actually looks like he knows what he's doing. And he's, maybe more muscular than the average person and seems like he's been training for a while and he's getting good results. And whoa, this guy's actually vegan. And how is he doing that? And it sort of challenges some of those stereotypes and misconceptions that people have. And so that's something that I try to really do and I find really rewarding.
Nice. When you mention dieting down for competition, do you actually count the macronutrients and count them when bulking?
Yep, great question. So I do both. I count calories and macronutrients during the contest prep diet, probably more strictly at that time, because of course everything just has to be a little bit more dialed in, but I also track them during the off season as well. Some people don't. A lot of folks like to just kind of eyeball or estimate their calorie intake during the off season because you do have more leeway there. But I'm very interested in optimality. And so I track everything all the time. Occasionally I'll have like meals out and stuff like that where it's hard to track, but I just enjoy having that data. So I know that I'm kind of doing things to the best extent that I can. And I don't find it that difficult to do. I just use an app called MyFitnessPal on my phone. It's very simple and easy to use. A lot of my clients use it as well. And that kind of streamlines the tracking process to a great degree. So that's what I personally do. But again, tracking is not for everyone. If you don't want to, you absolutely don't have to. And particularly for folks who want to lose weight, just eating a whole food plant-based diet, as you know, of course, can go a long way towards achieving that goal without having to track anything.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of protein questions today. Trish says, I want to add more plant-based dishes to my lifestyle due to lack of protein intake and losing weight. Is that considered a good option?
Yeah, so if you're losing weight, and again, it sounds like this individual maybe is losing weight and doesn't want to be losing weight, what is actually going to basically prevent that weight loss from occurring is just to eat more calories from any source. But yeah, eating a little bit more protein is probably not a bad idea if you're interested in, maintaining muscle and things like that. And so, yeah, just, adding in things like, rice and beans or lentils, chickpeas, things of that nature, tofu and tempeh, all good. You don't have to be downing protein shakes all the time. But yeah, just adding more calories will help if you're losing weight and you don't want to. And adding more protein will help if you're interested in, kind of enhancing muscle mass outcomes.
Nice. Thanks. Larry says, where did it go? I saw a question from you. Yes. When you are, guys, it helps if you put 4 question marks before and after. It differentiates it from a comment. When you are shredding for a competition, do you limit grains to like a cup a day of something, or do you do no nuts, seeds, and avocado?
Yeah, good question. So I don't necessarily cut out nuts, seeds, and avocado altogether. I probably still have a few of those in there. Definitely less than when I'm in the off season, because in the off season they're very helpful to eat because you need to get those calories in. 4,000 calories a day is not going to eat itself, particularly on a whole food plant-based diet. And so those calorie dense foods are really helpful. But I still keep some of them in during the contest prep period, just probably a lot less than during the off season. As far as grains, I wouldn't necessarily limit it to like 1 cup, but again, it would just be eating a little bit less. What I do is I just have a certain calorie goal that I set for myself, and I calculate that based on my past calorie intake, what my body weight is doing in the data that I have. And so then I just fill in those calories with the macronutrients that I have available. So basically protein, I always keep constant because you don't want to be slashing protein during a contest prep diet. That's more likely to risk muscle loss then. And then I just manipulate fat and carbs. Fat will usually go to kind of baseline levels, which is around 0.3 grams per pound. And then carbs will be as many as I can fit in and not go over my calorie goal. Eating more carbs is really helpful because it helps your performance and your recovery from training. But yeah, calories that you're cutting have to be cut from somewhere. And so after fat is already as low as it can go, then I would definitely eat, fewer grams of carbs, which will mean, smaller portions of grains and things like that.
Great. Thanks. Who does the cooking in your family?
I actually do most of it, believe it or not, because my partner is in the process of doing a PhD at the moment, and so she has maybe less free time. But I do a lot of the batch cooking, meal prep, where I'll cook big batches of tofu or baked tofu, oil-free in the oven, rice and beans or chickpeas or things of that nature, baked potatoes and sweet potatoes. And then my partner comes out and eats them. But yeah, I do the majority of the cooking. She'll cook. She's been to cooking school. She's a much better cook than me. So she'll cook kind of like special meals every now and again. But in terms of kind of the tofu and potatoes, the bulk of it, so to speak, I do a lot of that.
Wow, she's very lucky. Okay, there's a question from Jean. Have you ever heard of the franchise Osteo Strong?
I have not, no.
I don't know what that
Sorry,
is.
I can't provide more insight on that, but if Jean wants to share what it is, I can maybe give some thoughts on it.
Yep. Okay. What do you mean if you weigh 150 pounds to gain muscle, you should eat up to 150 grams of protein per day?
Yeah, so that would be 1 gram per pound. That would be kind of the high end of the recommended range, where you definitely don't need to eat any more than that. But you could also eat, significantly less and probably still gain muscle just fine. And so if you're coming from a lower protein intake, or maybe you don't want to eat that much because of the longevity trade-offs I mentioned earlier, then you could probably eat closer to like 100 grams of protein per day, and you probably gain muscle just fine. Particularly if you're kind of earlier along in the process of resistance training, building muscle, and those sorts of things. You probably gain muscle just fine with much lower protein intake. 100 grams per day might be fine. For someone like myself, again, I've been training for 15 years. And so if I want to get any further progress, it's kind of like I have to do everything in my power to really make that happen. So I eat more protein than that. It might come with a little bit of a longevity trade-off. I'm hoping that all the whole plant foods I'm eating will kind of balance that out a little bit. And also, once I hit 40 or something like that, I'll probably eat less protein and kind of hang up the spurs, so to speak, in bodybuilding. But yeah, for right now, I'm trying to get a few more good years in.
That's great. Thanks. Here's a question from Sherry. Have you ever done a raw vegan nutrition plan?
I don't know if have I followed one myself personally? The answer is no. I like cooked foods. There's a lot of, healthy food groups there, like grains and legumes, that you'd be cutting out if you're raw vegan. I maybe have had a few clients who are interested in raw stuff, and so like written up a meal plan for somebody with raw foods. But again, yeah, it's not something that I follow myself or particularly recommend. Raw foods are great. They're super healthy, but a lot of cooked foods also are. And so, yeah, I definitely include both in the diet.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Mandy says, do you know of more vegan personal trainers in Australia? And do you think more PTs are learning about and promoting whole food plant-based eating?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are definitely a handful of other vegan personal trainers in Australia. I can think of a few just in Melbourne, where I live, but also, yeah, in other cities in Australia as well. And I would say, yeah, probably PTs, but also just people in general, kind of across all different demographics of life, are learning more about the benefits of whole food plant-based eating. And so, yeah, it's probably good, folks who are in that capacity where they're maybe advising their clients on nutrition, get more knowledge and information about that, and then they can pass some of that along. Of course, that's what I try to do with my clients. But yeah, it definitely is, I would say it's kind of on the rise there. Sort of the plant-based revolution is moving on, which is really cool to see.
Nice. All right. When you no longer want to compete, do you still track everything?
Yes. Yeah. So that's probably similar to the off-season question that was asked earlier. Or maybe they're thinking like in 10 years, if I retire from bodybuilding, am I still going to track everything? Maybe not, who knows at that time, but currently in my off-season, I still track everything.
Okay. All right. So I'm just answering the question in the chat that I don't understand. It's a Zoom question. So can I check the proper form on Zoom? And what role does that?
I think I know the answer to that question. So what they might be asking is if they were doing like, maybe online coaching or that sort of thing, can they show their workout?
I get it now. I thought, okay, you are very smart that you can figure out all these questions, even with misspelling. I know now, I exactly know what the question is. I thought they were like asking me, like if there was something wrong with the broadcast. They're asking if they're a client, does virtual work? Because maybe you've got to watch what they're doing. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's a great question, and you absolutely can do that. I have had a few clients where they actually like to do the workout live on Zoom and have me watching, so then I can kind of correct it in real time if the exercise technique needs adjusting. But what I do with a lot of my clients is we have our sessions where we're just chatting, just like you and I are right now, and then they actually go and do the workouts at a time that's convenient for them. Because of course, most people are going to be working out, maybe 3 or 4 days a week, and so that's more than what we'll do just Zoom sessions. But what I do is I have an app that they can download and have it on their phone, and it walks them through all the workouts. It has video demonstrations of the exercises, all the sets and reps and everything are all laid out there. And so it makes it pretty easy to follow along. And then what folks can do is they can actually record a video of themselves doing the exercise, and they can upload that into the app and send it to me. And then when we have our check-ins, I can look at it and provide feedback and kind of, make adjustments and that sort of thing. So absolutely can do that with the remote format. Sometimes it's not quite as immediate as you would be with doing a personal training session in the gym, but I find it still works really well.
Oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How did you cope with the lockdown?
That's a good question. Lockdown was hard for me because I really love going to the gym. And here in Melbourne, Australia, we had the dubious accolade of having more days in lockdown than any other city in the world over the last 2 years. So yeah, we had quite a few lockdowns here. Basically, I just worked out at home, and it's not quite the same, of course. You can still get a pretty decent workout at home. I've got some resistance bands, and actually had a friend who loaned me some weights, which was really helpful. But yeah, I just did the best that I could with home workouts. And then, yeah, I was very happy each time the lockdown came to an end and I was able to get back to the gym.
Yep. Tanya says, so can I be in a calorie deficit and still gain muscle?
It depends where you are in sort of your training and nutrition journey. For most folks, it's pretty unlikely that that's going to happen. That's kind of the body recomposition effect that everybody wants to chase, because it's like the best of both worlds. You lose fat and gain muscle at the same time. That's amazing. Unfortunately, they're kind of, those two goals are kind of at odds, because being in a calorie deficit is the most powerful stimulus of weight loss and body fat loss. And in order to stimulate muscle growth, you actually want to be in a calorie surplus, where you have the extra calories coming in to really kind of, signal to your body that, times are good and it's okay to slap on some extra muscle tissue, which is metabolically expensive. And so if you're in a calorie deficit, it's a lot less likely muscle gain is going to occur. That being said, if you're a beginner where you just started training and maybe you just started tracking your diet and eating a little bit more scientifically, those new stimuli can be so powerful from the novelty of it that you can absolutely gain a little bit of muscle while you're losing weight in a calorie deficit. So if that's you, yeah, potentially, but I wouldn't necessarily set out as your goal, like, yeah, I'm going to build muscle and lose fat at the same time. It's like, pick which one is your top priority and focus on that for a while. And then down the road, of course, you can always shift gears and focus on the other one.
Great. You are very knowledgeable. Okay. Here we go. I went to a personal trainer who focused on my shoulders, said women neglect this area. I ended up getting this area developed, and it really wanted my core. Wanted it. See that you guys can't do typos, because I wanted my core and legs to develop too. Is this normal? And okay, I really wanted my core and legs to develop too. Is this, maybe I'm just the one that can't read today?
That's okay. So it sounds like that person went, they did a bunch of shoulder training, maybe developed their shoulders, and they want their core and legs to develop too. And, just do more exercises for those areas. So for your legs, doing things like squats and lunges and leg press and things of that nature will probably be really good there for development. And if you want to develop your core, of course, there's lots of different core exercises you can do, things like sit-ups and crunches and tons of different machines at the gym. And so that would probably be a good place to start if you want to develop those areas.
Good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Chris wants to know, what's your approach for tightening up loose flesh after weight loss?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's kind of a tough one. So if you were in the situation where maybe you had quite a bit of weight to lose and then you lost that, over time, sometimes there is a little bit of loose skin that kind of hangs around there. If you're losing weight gradually, that might help, because then your body just has more time to kind of adapt to being smaller and sort of, tightening up some of that loose skin there. But unfortunately, yeah, you might get to the end of your sort of weight loss journey and just find that you do have some loose skin there that's left over. And yeah, I don't have a great answer for that. Some folks go and get surgery to have it removed, and that absolutely is a thing. But yeah, there's not like, rub coconut oil on your skin and that'll get rid of it. No, I'm not aware of anything like that.
Yep, absolutely. If only, right?
Yeah, only good use for coconut oil, maybe. Is that
yeah, taking off makeup, it works pretty good.
Yeah, that's what my partner does too.
Yep. Angel says, any tips on carb consumption timing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. So carb timing does matter if you are, training or doing physical activities that are demanding. It is definitely beneficial to have some carbs before that activity if you can. So let's say you work out in the afternoon, maybe an hour or two before that, having a meal that contains some carbs and also some protein is a good idea. You probably don't want to eat a big meal right before training, because then you're just not necessarily going to feel very good and the blood gets kind of pulled away from your digestion to go and fuel the muscles then. So give it an hour or two to kind of digest and absorb, and then probably go and do your workout, have great energy. And then the same thing is also true after training. Getting some carbs and protein in at that time is really beneficial because the muscles are more sensitive to those nutrients at that time. And so that can really help with your recovery and just kind of get a jump start on replenishing the energy, the carbs basically that you used during the workout, and allow those muscle glycogen carbohydrate stores to refill.
Do you recommend people work out on an empty stomach, or does it depend what their goals are?
Yeah, it definitely depends on the goal. So if somebody's interested in fat loss, there seems to be some research that shows maybe training fasted, like doing fasted cardio or that sort of thing, might have a slight benefit there where you're burning a little bit more calories from fat as a fuel source specifically if you train in a fasted state, but it's not going to make a huge difference. So if you enjoy waking up and you're maybe going for a walk or run fasted, cool, go ahead and do that if fat loss is your goal. For everyone else, it's probably a decent idea to have something to eat beforehand for the reasons that I just mentioned, because you will then probably have more energy for your workout and get a better workout if you've had some basically fuel in the tank beforehand.
Makes sense. If I were strength training during a calorie deficit, what happens? Just build bone density?
Yeah, so during a calorie deficit, you're probably, again, like I said earlier, you're not necessarily going to gain a ton of muscle mass. You might gain a little bit if you're relatively new to the process. But yeah, bone density will definitely benefit from it. And the important thing that happens that I think not a lot of people realize is you won't lose muscle, or you'll lose much less than if you were just in a calorie deficit without doing strength training. Because lots of folks go and they do a diet, maybe they do a lot of cardio, they eat less, they lose weight just fine, but they don't necessarily end that diet with sort of the shape or the muscle tone that they want. They might end up just looking kind of like a smaller version of the same shape, which can be a little bit frustrating. And so doing resistance training is super important if you are in a calorie deficit, because you have a catabolic stimulus already present from that deficit. Your body is breaking down its own tissue to make up the calories that you're not getting from your diet. And you want to make sure that tissue that's getting broken down is fat and not muscle. And so if you're using your muscles all the time doing hard resistance training sessions, then your body's like, well, I guess I better hang on to these. And so then fat is going to be used as the fuel source, which of course is what we want.
Yep. Well, speaking of fat, Michelle says, I often encounter people who are overweight, but believe oil is healthy and necessary for good nutrition. Do you have a good suggestion for what to say to them?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, if they think oil is healthy and necessary for good nutrition, that might explain why they're overweight. Some oils do have sort of a health halo effect where unfortunately, a lot of people actually think coconut oil is really healthy. But yeah, that's probably just a situation where maybe you can kind of say something, you want to be polite. You won't say, hey, that's stupid, or, kind of challenge somebody's beliefs because they won't be receptive to what you have to say, but say, hey, I've heard some different information about that. Maybe point them towards some of the really good evidence-based research that are out there, like, Dr. Michael Greger's website, nutritionfacts.org. Maybe you could, send them a few videos on there or something like that. But really, it comes down to, people have to sort of educate themselves and get the proper information there, and then they can kind of adjust their behavior pattern based on that if they want to. Some people know oil's not healthy and they still eat it anyway because it's tasty, and that's fine. It's up to them. But yeah, the best you can probably do in that situation is just try to provide some good information.
But is it really tasty, or is it the caloric density? Because just oil by itself to me doesn't taste very good. You need a lot of.
No, yeah, but maybe if I get like an extra virgin olive oil or a salad or something, it might be tasty. But yeah, the fried food and stuff like that, I certainly don't have much of a taste for it. But I think a lot of that has to do with what you're accustomed to. Some people are eating that stuff every day, and so they just get used to it. And because those foods are hyper calorie dense and sort of hyper palatable with a combination of salt, oil, and sugar, people just get sort of desensitized to what normal healthy food actually tastes like, and they think they have to eat those in order to enjoy food, which is not the case. But yeah, it can take a little bit of time to readjust in the other direction.
I'm just curious, growing up and not eating meat, did you ever ask your parents why, or did your friends ever, what was that like? Because I think it's completely awesome. I wish that I had that life, but like, you just probably thought it was normal. But did anybody either ever challenge you or just say, hey, how come you don't want to go to McDonald's?
Yeah, that's a great question. I probably did ask my parents about it at some point when I sort of learned that like meat was a thing that other people ate sometimes. But yeah, I think they probably would have just said it was for ethical reasons because that was the reason. And, that makes sense to me. And so I was okay with that. And then, yeah, as I got older and I got more into fitness and bodybuilding and stuff like that, I did encounter a few people who were like, hey, yeah, you're pretty muscular, but maybe if you ate meat, you'd be more muscular. And I was just like, probably not. And so now that there's, lots and lots of really great world-class vegan athletes out there nowadays, it's easier to be more confident in that position. Like not eating meat isn't really costing you anything as far as building muscle is concerned. And so, yeah, I feel pretty happy with that.
What part of the United States did you grow up in?
Virginia.
Virginia. Okay. So like, did you bring your lunch to school, or, I'm just curious, did your friends ever say, where's the beef?
Yeah, great question. I was actually homeschooled, so I didn't have to worry about
You
that.
didn't even have to. Oh, well, that makes it easy. Great.
Hmm.
Angel says, would carb consumption before a long distance run improve performance?
Yeah, almost certainly. Definitely recommend doing that. And depending on how long the run is, some runners like to have, running gels or different things like that they actually have during it, because you can run into an issue where you're doing, like, say, really kind of endurance type activity, where you actually run out of your body's sort of short-term stored carbohydrate in the form of glycogen. And I think endurance athletes refer to that as hitting the wall, where you just really feel like you can't keep going at that point. And so if you have some fast digesting carbs coming in, maybe like an hour into that activity or something, I'm not an expert on running, but something like that, that can help if you're doing really long distance. If it's more moderate distance, then yeah, just have some before and after would probably be good.
Right. Well, how do people work with you if they'd like to? And how long do people usually work with you for? Is it several times a week, once a week for several months?
Yeah, great question. So if folks are interested in working with me, they can reach out to me on my website or any of my social media platforms, which I think, you can link down in the description if you want to there. But yeah, I'm always happy to chat with people. And even if we don't end up working together, I'm happy to answer questions or things like that. So I do offer, free consultation to anyone who's interested. And then if they feel like it's a good match for what they're after, then we can move forward. But in terms of kind of how it works, typically we'll have weekly sessions over the phone or via Zoom. So just like what you and I are doing right now, we'll set up the program for them. We'll give them, a custom tailored training program based on what their goals are that they can implement either at the gym or at home, depending on what they have access to. And then, yeah, we'll do those weekly check-ins. Typically the check-ins are just once a week, but I do offer kind of unlimited email, text message, those sorts of support in between. So I try to really answer questions that come up whenever possible. And then, yeah, some folks do it for a shorter period of time, like, maybe 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, but I've got plenty of clients who really, enjoy it, or they feel like they're getting some value out of the service. And so they do it for the long term. Like I've got folks who've been going for multiple years, and yeah, I really enjoy that. It's great for me, of course, kind of have a stable income there, but yeah, obviously they're getting some value out of it, I guess. So yeah, happy to help out there if I can.
That's great. Do you have a social media presence? Do you like people to follow you anywhere?
So I have an Instagram, Facebook page. I'm not super active on either of those, but people absolutely can follow me there. And then, yeah, if they're interested in kind of reaching out to me directly, you can shoot me a message on either of those, or on my website, there's a contact page there as well that's got all my details.
That's terrific. I hope people will reach out to you. Any aspirations to write a book?
That's a great question. I don't know if book writing is in the future. I have been giving a lot of thought to maybe like setting up some courses where I might put some of the knowledge and information that I share with my clients and some of the structure into sort of a compartmentalized format like that. So maybe if folks don't necessarily want to do like the one-to-one coaching, they could still benefit from something in that format. So that might be something that's coming in the future. But yeah, I guess stay tuned.
Well, I'm very happy to meet you. You seem just like a very wonderful, positive person. And thank you so much for being vegan and helping other people become vegan and get in shape.
Oh, thank you so much for the kind words, Chef AJ. Really absolute pleasure chatting with you today. Thanks to everyone for tuning in and bringing the great questions. And yeah, hopefully they got some benefit out of it. And
I mean, you were great. You couldn't even see the chat and you knew what the questions were. So
using my telepathic abilities there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Forrest. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Please come back tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific time when we have Dr. John McDougall talking about the incredible egg. Did you have Easter in Australia yesterday, which is still today here?
Yeah. Easter is actually a big thing here. So it's like there's a 4-day weekend. Easter Monday is a public holiday, so today, and then Good Friday is also a holiday. So a lot of people like go away and do stuff for Easter and those sort of things. I'm pretty low key. I didn't do anything too crazy, but yeah, Easter was definitely observed here.
Well, that was perfect, so that I didn't interrupt your day too much.
Not at all. Yeah.
All right. Well, it's so nice to meet you. Thank you so much, Forrest. Take care.
Likewise.